Before we get started talking about the big sleep, though, do you guys have questions, comments, concerns about the paper? I made the short video for you on Blackboard and put the prompt up. So I trust that most of you have gotten a chance to look at it. Um, Anything in particular that I can answer, maybe about the writing of it, what I'm looking for, anything that I didn't make clear in that video, perhaps now's a good time to ask. I made the video just so I wouldn't take too much time away from class. So, but I will take a few minutes if you guys have questions or concerns or anything of that nature. All right. Well, very good then. You guys know you can always ask me anytime. I'm here. If you come up with an early draft or something, I'll be happy to take a look too. So feel free to shoot it my way if you get done fairly early. The day before it's due, I'm not going to read it. Okay, but if you get it to me fairly early, I'll try to give you some early feedback if you want. So do your best with this. Later in the term, when you do your final paper, now I'll actually give you the option to build your final paper off of one of these short papers we're doing. So you might end up doing your final paper on another one of the short papers we'll do, but ideally that question helps lead you into a bigger project. So hopefully you have lots of options to pick from. I gave a question about every movie we did in the drama category. So hopefully there's some good papers. I trust I'm going to get good papers out of this class. I'm sure that I will. But this isn't a writing class. So I didn't go too in depth about writing stuff. So if you guys ever need some advice or need me to teach more of that kind of stuff, let me know and I'll be happy to. Okay.
I hate to make you repeat everything, but it's been 10 minutes me trying to get into this Zoom class. For some reason, my phone or my computer's been very laggy and slow. So just Cliff Notes version of what you just said, please.
All I said was just a reminder. I put up the stuff on the first short paper up on Blackboard. So if you haven't gotten a chance to look at that yet, and asked the class if they had questions about anything, nobody had any. So that's all you've missed so far.
Good deal. Thank you.
All right, so today's film, The Big Sleep, 1946, directed by Howard Hawks. Howard Hawks is a name that you'll oftentimes hear in about the golden age of Hollywood. He did, I wouldn't call him a great director, like but he was a competent director. He knew how to make a movie that would make money. Right, that's part of the key in Hollywood. A lot of these directors we're talking about that make great films, but never were very successful commercially. Right. So Howard Hawks is a guy who was very successful commercially. He directed all kinds of genres. He did this. He did several westerns. Rio Bravo is an example of a western I know that he did with John Wayne. Um, he even delved into the horror genre. He directed the Thing from Another World, the 1950s version of The Thing from Another World, which John Carpenter would later remake in the 80s, which we will be watching later in the class, the 80s version. So, quite an accomplished guy in multiple genres. Just the fact that he existed in so many genres, I think, is pretty impressive. But again, this movie comes from a novel, a noir novel. But interestingly enough, it was written as a screenplay by William Faulkner, who was one of our great American writers. Right? We just coincidentally just finished talking about him in my other class. Right? I did not plan that, so it's interesting how that goes. But William Faulkner was a great Southern writer who mostly wrote about Mississippi. Right. So the fact that he pretty much just tried his hand at Hollywood. He was this very serious writer. Right? He wanted to prove that he could write anything, right? Not just very serious literature. So he took his hand at screenplay writing, and now we're talking about one of the few movies he wrote the screenplay for. So interesting from that angle. The screenwriter is something we haven't really talked a lot about, but he played a major part in this movie. Again, we have Bogart here, so we have another performance from him. This movie is interesting from him from a personal standpoint, because during the production of this movie, he actually fell in love with Lauren Bacall, who plays the femme fatale here. Right? So Miss Rutledge. So they got married and had kids and all that stuff, right, after this movie. I don't think their marriage lasted either, right? But Bogart's first marriage was breaking up during this movie. So it might have been partially because of Bacall. I don't know all the juicy details, right? But interestingly enough, too, from a composition standpoint, this movie has a unique history. They filmed this movie, and then the studio actually told them to go back and do reshoots because they thought that Mrs. Rutledge's character, Lauren Bacall's character, they didn't think she was very well fleshed out. Right? In the early prints of the movie, the younger sister actually has more scenes, but they took her scenes out and put more scenes in with Bogart and Bacall. So they wanted to make her a star, so they went back and did more reshoots. So again, we see the commercial side of Hollywood at play. So again, a classic example. Usually whenever we talk about a Bogart noir, it's either this one or the Maltese Falcon. Right, those are the two exemplary ones that he did. So we've already seen one noir, Double Indemnity. So you guys now know the tropes, right? So what's your general thoughts on this film? What do you make of it? Turn the floor over to you guys. I know we normally start with Crystal, right? So Crystal, you're not going to escape. So tell us what you thought.
Well, I'll go ahead and start as tradition ensues, but
Precedent.
Do what?
I said it's legal precedent at this point.
Yeah, exactly. I love this genre of film. I absolutely love it. I was hooked on this movie from beginning to end. I believe that it had enough twists and enough suspense to keep you going. I loved the monologue, the really sarcastic back and forth that they had. I loved that. Like that was a high peak to me. Another thing that I mentioned in my thread was that he would tug on his ear, and it seemed that right after that a light bulb would come on, and he would be putting some type of plan together. Hurry up and pick up the phone to call his buddy. Um, so I don't know. I don't know if that was in the movie for that, if that was one of his nervous twitches that he's known for. Um, what exactly that was, but that intrigued me. Also, that Lauren Bacall, she was a little masculine in this. She wasn't that prissy, short skirt wearing type woman. She was a very take charge, dominant, independent woman, just trying to cover up all the mess that her little sister had made. I believe that she felt like that her and Humphrey Bogart were in like competition almost because she didn't like him being on her territory. So that's why she tried to pay him off to get him to just stop. But I believe in the end she developed a respect for him and how in depth that he would go. Um, and then of course, out of nowhere, I love you. Well, I love you too. But I loved the lighting in it. I mean, I loved everything about this film. I was impressed.
Yeah, one of my favorite scenes with the lighting is when the murder happens in the office, pretty close to the end. Right, and you see the shadow of the murderer running away. Right, that's a classic sort of noir trope. Corey?
In both murder scenes, actually, in the one at the house, whenever you hear her scream and you see the light flash, of the camera, I suppose, and then you again whenever the what was his name, Jones, gets poisoned,
Jump.
you get to see all of that and that shadowing and lighting in there too.
Well, I'm a definitely a fan of this film. The black and white also goes a long way with me. Uh, the Humphrey Bogart to me is just he's one of those tough guys. I read one. I think it was one of the things that you posted for us or heard it. It said that he could be a tough guy even without a gun, and he's got that. Though he's not probably his frame. I think that I read also where he was a very not a large stature of a man at all, but and they even make notice of that. The ladies do in this film. But he is just, and Crystal brought out a great point, I thought, about his mannerisms. They're classic in everything he does. Um, I love the one scene where Bogart is, he's like undercover. He's got this hat he puts down and he brings these sunglasses in and he goes into this place. And you can tell it wasn't something that he was really gifted at. Um, but he is wonderful. I am intrigued too by these movies, the ones we have seen thus far, how much that women and cigarettes are involved in these movies. I mean, everybody has a cigarette in their hand, and I'm sure they got a lot of money from maybe the cigarette companies in the early days. Might be something worth investigating, by the way. But also the the ladies that were in this movie. I mean, everyone is classically beautiful in this. Even the cab driver, if you'll remember her, she's very pretty. The two bookstore people are very beautiful. I mean, and so they use these characters in that sense to bring out about all these plots, which I think that it really gets involved in these plots, and I'm loving this movie. So I do hate that we only see the general really about one time, but then he's out. But I thought it was a well put together movie. I loved it.
Out of everybody we've watched so far, what's the dude's name? Bogart's character. He's been the most charismatic, I think, at least. Like, just every single scene he's in, all of his back talk, just every bit of dialogue he's in, it's perfect. It, like I said, it makes him very charismatic.
Yeah, we have the witty
Yeah,
detective.
Philip Marlowe. Yeah, and also they use again that dialogue. I don't know what you would call it. That dialogue ability to ask fast questions, you get fast answers, then you get another. I mean, that happens several times in this movie, and I really like that also. So the dialogues as they went along, it brought back memories of some of the other movies that we watched also.
Other thought, general impressions of The Big Sleep before we dive into specifics. Well, let's talk about something I want to talk about today. Corey, this is what you wrote about is innuendo in the movie. There's so much innuendo in this. We talked about it in Double Indemnity for sure, like some of the very charged dialogue. It's very much evident here. Corey, I never considered what you said about thunder, right? But yeah, it's interesting. Explain your point to the class so that they'll know.
Well, it seemed to fall out a little bit towards the end, or at least maybe I wasn't paying that much attention more towards the end. But it seemed like every single time that he was being very charismatic and there happened to be a woman in the room and it was obvious there were implications of sex, then there would be thunder in the background. It was always raining and it would be very loud. It would be very apparent. And I had watched and heard about thunder being like a symbol in other contexts in movies. And I was like, well, what is it supposed to represent here? And I just kind of put two and two together. And especially once it's compared with the woman right across the street from Geiger's place. I'm thinking Geiger's his name. Across the street from his place, where she closed the shades and you hear thunder and all of that. It's very apparent at that point what's going on.
Yeah, she puts her glasses down and does that with her hair, right? So yeah, it's interesting that they signify it, right, without it being blatant and in your face. Um, yeah,
Yeah, the lady in I think that was the second bookstore, where she lets down her hair. She takes off her glasses that she doesn't necessarily need. And I was noticing in that scene, um, Philip Maloney, he's looking at something, much like we would look at our phones today. He's looking at a pad or a paper, and she does this so quickly. She turns from this bookstore keeper into this very sensuous woman. Her name was Dorothy Malone, I think. And as I was watching the movie, when I watch older movies, I try to look at these folks as what they will look like when they're older to see if I see them later in something else. And I've seen her in a lot of things. So I thought that was another one too, was when she was said, Bogart makes the statement, he says, I collect blondes in bottles too. And of course, this lady had big, thick glasses, but yet behind those glasses, she was very impressive. So,
right, another good scene is when he and Macaulay are talking about back and forth to each other when they're in the restaurant, right? That's very charged innuendo at that point between the two as well. Um, did you guys pick up? Did you guys pick up on the plot as far as they didn't come out and say it to your face? But did you guys pick up on the plot about what was happening with the younger sister?
took me a little bit. Um, it took me a little while to get it, but it seemed like every time I'd be a little bit confused, he would quickly in the character clean it up, and then I would understand. That's what I was intrigued about the movie so much. There were a lot of characters in this movie, and so you had to try to keep up with the characters. But yeah, and then after a while, I got that the one daughter, the young daughter, was maybe the not so good daughter. And the older daughter was the good daughter, which we found out later is not necessarily true either. So they both have their little isms, and but I thought it was intriguing, the plot and how it was heading down a certain road. I just didn't know how we was going to get there, but I loved it. It was a movie that at the end you kind of understood what was going on.
She was into pornography, was she not?
Yep, you got it. That they had the film, and they were trying to blackmail the general with the film.
I don't know about you all, but when we first encounter the younger daughter, and once we really get to see her a little bit, I get almost uncomfortable, partially because of the way that she's made to seem like a child, but at the same time, like super sexual. It made me very uncomfortable when we first encountered her.
Yep, same. Completely same. It made me feel very weird too. And like when the general says that she's like a child, like not even just like a child, like a little child, like he is implying she's like the age of 4 or 5. And the first scene we see her in, she's basically like, that is the closest thing you could get to a sex scene in the 40s, I can imagine. And she's portrayed in the very next scene like she's some sort of child. And then when she's high on drugs, she's like tracing the outline of her dress like a toddler would. It made me very, very uncomfortable too.
Yeah, and how she sucks her, not really sucks her thumb, but she'll bite on her thumbnail,
Mhm.
and they keep bringing that out. Like her dad talked about it, Bogart talked about it, so they kind of hit on that a lot.
Yeah, and all the adults are having to take care of her because she's portrayed this way. And the way they bring it out in the film, it does make you a little bit hesitant. Uncomfortable, I guess, is a good word. But she may be old enough to know better, but I'm not sure she knows better.
Yeah, it raises questions about consent too, right? Just because, like when Bogart gets to where she's at, right? She seems drugged out of her mind, right? When they murder Geiger, right? So if they were in there like filming porn, right? Obviously, it's implied there was no consent there too. So that's another uncomfortable aspect of the movie.
I didn't realize that it was intentional on her part. Like, I didn't realize it was porn at first. I thought it was more of a candid shot. Somebody took a picture of her outside, like after she got out of the shower or something. And then later, honestly, it just kind of lost my mind because I was too busy looking for the twists and turns.
Mhm.
But yeah, and when you mentioned it, it still kind of made me feel even more uneasy because I was the same way. I was like, really? She's intentionally doing that? And we've seen this woman suck her thumb on camera? Like, it just makes me gross.
And throughout the film, as her character kind of develops more, it made me wonder if she, if in the universe of the film, she was displaying herself as a child to be seen as almost innocent and to get away with more, is what I got from it. And another note, I don't know if it stuck out to you, but it stuck out to me when we first saw her, in that studio where the man had just been killed. She's wearing, I don't know what the name is it, but the garment is like significant to Asian culture. And I thought that is just so strange that, predominantly a white area, and they're filming porn for that area. They're going to want to fetishize Asian women when minorities at that time would have been looked down on. I thought it was very strange.
I didn't pick up on that. That's interesting.
Concerning her again, even in the first, I guess the first scene, they're close about, she's there talking to Philip Malone, and he's disinterested in her. He's not interested at all, and she's going to find a way to get his attention, much like a child would do. You know, they'll pull on your pant leg or they'll do something while you're talking, and they want to get your attention. She acts as though she's going to walk away, and then she falls into his arms. And so that was certainly an attention. He wasn't impressed with that. And I think it bothered her that he wasn't impressed with that, because it seems like to me she's not only a child, she's a spoiled brat child too.
And that was
To
a
kind of go, oh, go ahead, you're fine.
I was
No,
gonna
go
s-
ahead.
yeah, you go ahead first.
I was going
I'll-
to say to kind of add to her character, I had a hard time following with the plot, so what I did was kind of dive into the characters and the actor of the characters. But like you had spoke on earlier, Dr. Yeager, that the movie was like edited and kind of butchered before it was put out into the world. A lot of her scenes were cut. She had all kinds, and like her character outdone Vivian. So they really cut down a lot of her scenes, and she had even more like explicit scenes that was taken away.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Reagan. I don't know what types of scenes they were, content wise or anything like that. But they did diminish the importance of her character for sure in comparison.
You know, Hollywood at the time and still today is very competitive. You know, Lauren Bacalli's coming up, and of course, her and Humphrey Bogart. He's a star, and I think he's over 20 years older than she is. They have this. I can see where they could. I'm not saying this happened at all, but I can see where they would have put pressure on the filmmakers to say, "Hey, let's make sure that Vivian Rutledge gets more attention than her younger sister." And so far, we are seeing that that's not taking place. I mean, who knows what goes on in the competitive world? But somewhere along the line, they cut those scenes and gave them to Lauren Bacall. Something's happened.
Yeah, from what I've read about it, it was a case where the studio executives were like, "You got to do something about this. We have to make Lauren Bacall a star." And Howard
Mhm.
Hawks, the director, actually was opposed to it. Like he had his vision, and they kind of meddled with his vision. And when we still have a successful film, but that's the type of thing sometimes happens. Probably the most recent example is in Hollywood today is probably Justice League, right? You guys all know the story about Justice League and how right in the middle of shooting it, they like the studios came in and completely changed it, right? And they made it into a crappy film. So now they're getting ready to release the real Justice League, right? So it's a very similar thing with this film, except in this case, it actually worked out. It seems the studios often do get involved, much to the detriment of a film. You got to make money with movies. That's something that unlike other art, right? This is kind of an art. I mean, this is an arts class, right? Compared to other arts, right? Especially visual art. Visual art, these artists don't really make much money unless they're like super famous. Um, Music, it's hard for new musicians to make it big, right? But film, right? It's definitely a genre that's centered around profitability. And profitability versus artfulness, that's always the battle that the film industry goes through. Um, Even today, right? Even today, just as think about it, you really today only have three major movie studios after all these movie studios have merged. Right? You got Disney, you got Warner Brothers, and you got Sony. That's it. Right. So after Disney absorbed 20th Century Fox, So they stifled a lot of creativity in the movie industry. So compared to what it used to be. So role of the studio, interesting subject. Warner Brothers made this one, by the way. And yeah, we talked about this character. Let's talk about Macaulay's character now. We can also talk about Bogart's character too, Philip Marlowe, right? We can talk about him as well. What'd you guys make of this Macaulay character, Lauren Macaulay's character? Crystal said she was kind of more masculine, right? Especially compared to maybe Miss Dietrich from the last movie. Even compared to the younger sister, the younger sister seems more feminine than her. We asked the question last class: is the femme fatale archetype, is it misogynistic? You guys seem to think last class that no, it does showcase women's sexualities and stuff, even if it does it in dangerous ways. What do you guys think of how this movie handled that? She is a femme fatale, but she's not really a Black Widow so much, right? She's almost more of a damsel in distress type of femme fatale, right? So
When I first started out with her character, my thoughts about her changed as I went along in the movie. As I first thought about it, I thought, oh, she's going to be this big sister that's watching out for her little sister. But I didn't know what she was involved in. You know, you kind of look at things and say, well, here's the little sister. She's not being the good daughter she needs to be, or the good sister. And here's this older sister who has it together pretty well. But that changed for me as the time went on, and I saw that she too was involved in gambling and such things that bring about, no doubt, heartache in her own life. So I think her character changes as she goes along, and she's also involved with this private eye, and the more she's around him, the more that she becomes maybe has feelings for him.
It did kind of throw me off whenever he'd shown the receipts and they were signed by Carmen, which is the younger sister. But whenever they showed her in the gambling place in the club or whatever, I kind of was wondering, did she like sign her sister's name? And I'm kind of thinking bad of her at that point, not thinking that she was out there trying to get to the bottom of things for her sister, but yet having fun a little bit. But I kind of was wondering, like, is she just kind of making her sister look bad? Because you hear in the beginning how they are both not good sisters. I mean, they're not good women. So you kind of already have a prejudged effect on them.
I had a lot more sympathy for Rutledge this time around than I did for what's her name in Double Indemnity. Like I just seemed to she seemed more like somebody who was in a situation and trying to find her way out, rather as obviously in Double Indemnity, she's a woman with a plan and she's trying to kill her husband. This time it seems much more like she's been put in a situation and she's just trying to fix her problems and get back to her life.
yeah, it's interesting that she does try to resolve the problem by herself, right? She doesn't completely rely on Marlowe to do it. The fact that he keeps getting involved is almost coincidental, right? She, like Crystal said, she even tries to bribe him to leave it alone, but he can't stop the dog scent, so to speak, on the case. Other thoughts on this character?
I don't really have another one on her. I just thought about something when you said the dog's like the two tough guys that are supposed to be so tough, like they look like drowned rats. They did not look like big tough guys that would come in and muscle the situation up. I mean, I just thought that was hilarious that yeah, it wasn't big guys that they had as his muscle for that. It just reminded that you reminded me of it whenever you said calling the dogs.
Yeah, they even make the joke as the movie goes on, like in the casino, he sees them again, and they're like, "Leave me alone," because he's already beat them up several times. Not very
I
good.
don't know if anybody. Oh, sorry.
Or you go ahead, Corey.
I don't know if anybody else thought this. Maybe my sense of humor is just really specific to this movie, but I laughed several times throughout this movie. And the one guy who even Mars said was company for the other one, he said, "Go outside." He said, "Go outside." So I guess we're gonna go outside. And I don't know why that like legitimately made me laugh out loud. I was like, "That's hilarious." And then when he leaves, the other guy said, "He kills me." Like that's beautiful. That's top tier comedy in my eyes.
Yeah, the dry.
And think, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
And thinking about a little bit of comedy too, where there's the scene where Marlowe's coming, he's got a gun, he's down he's down beside the car, and the guy comes out on the porch. So Marlowe fires the gun into the ground, and the guy just absolutely throws his gun down and takes off running. And that scene where he was taking off running through the weeds looked like something on Old Brother Where Art Thou. So there was a little bit of occasionally there was some humor in it that I would giggle at also.
I liked when he threw the gun down just to trick the guy into kicking him. I thought that was a good. I kind of laughed at that. That was kind of humorous as well. He makes jokes. He makes jokes about guns too. He's like, everybody's pointing a gun at me today.
And there's a lot of guns. There's guns everywhere. And even I was telling Crystal that I'm always looking for these, I guess it's production problems or whatever. Like, you'll see a shadow of a camera or something. I'm always looking for things. In this one, he goes to his vehicle. He pulls down this James Bond kind of case out of the dashboard of his car, and there's two guns there. So he grabs the small gun, he puts it in his pocket, and he puts the guns, the dashboard back up. He comes later to do the very same thing. He pulls the gun down, and the gun that he takes is the small one that he'd taken before, and the gun that was the long-barreled gun's gone. So I don't know if that was, we were with him 100% of the time. So I think it was a misplay in maybe a production of the movie.
Yeah, those types of continuity errors do happen a lot. That's a good eye. I didn't catch that.
Yeah, and I noticed, and Crystal reminded me of something that she and I were talking about. And we do have an advantage to be able to talk about these movies. We've really, really enjoyed them. But if you would notice, 85% of the time, maybe even more, the camera is on Philip Marlowe. It's like this is his documentary, and we're watching the life of this PI. So, the camera's on him quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Bill. Point of view in the movie, right? Just because, is there even a scene in the movie that doesn't have Marlowe in it? I don't think so. I think he's in every single scene in some regard. So, I thought about that the more times I watched the movie. I thought he's never not in a scene in this, right? So.
And how did everyone have keys to this house? Like everybody in the entire movie had keys to this house. Like even Bogart had one after the fact. Now he kicked the windows in the first time he was there, and the second time he used a key and went on in. So I mean, I didn't agree with. I mean, like I didn't understand why everybody had a key to this house unless this was just the porn house and it was, something that the men in the community had a key to in the event they needed to go by there. I'm not sure about that.
Well, there is a theory on one of the gentlemen that they were, I think it came out in the book, that there was a homosexual relationship and that one of the men had the key because of that reason. That was brought out in some of the material that you gave us to look at. So in the movie, of course, they didn't get into that much. But I'm like Crystal, I don't know where all those keys come. If they were at our local hardware store, they'd have made a lot of money on copying keys for sure.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up too, Bill. Like the scene where the dead guy is in the house, like it is implied that those two had a homosexual relationship
Yes.
with each other, right? Geiger and the guy who was following Geiger, right? Those are the two. The one who shot
Yeah,
Joe,
he shot the guy in the motel.
right?
What was his name?
Joe was his name, I think, in the movie. Again, there's so many darn characters, right? It's
Yeah.
hard to keep up with them.
I liked how they had their insurance cards hanging from like the steering wheel or something, so that all you had to do was just open up the door and look to see whose car that was. Like I thought that was an interesting point. We don't keep our registrations normally hanging
It's in
for
the
all the
glove
world
box.
to see, but that was something different for me.
Yeah, nobody locked their doors either, so you can get in and see whose vehicle it is.
I liked how nonchalant the taxi driver scene was. He's like, "Tail this car." She's like, "All right."
Yeah, yeah. Do we do we think about Philip Marlowe as being an honest man? I mean, that was a question I had as we were going through. What's your all's take on that?
I go in immediately trusting whoever we're supposed to be focused on. Honestly, I didn't really have have a reason not to believe him, but that's just me at least.
Yeah,
I
we
agree.
can expand Bill's question into talking about Marlowe as a whole, if you want. Reagan, you wrote about it on the discussion board, the difference between his performance at Bogarts in this versus Casablanca. You want to talk about what you wrote about?
Yeah, I wrote about how one of the main things that stuck out to me was how Rick in Casablanca was really like a untouchable character, like you couldn't get him down. But in this movie, we literally watched him get beat up and tied up and stuff. So it really, like, I thought that was a major difference in him.
All right, so maybe maybe Marlowe in this movie is more of a human character, full of flaws, maybe more so than Rick was in Casablanca.
That's how I looked at it. Yeah.
Right.
Even so, Rick has the bar. He owns the bar, and in this movie, it's a point made that his office is just a little room, and he ain't got much money.
I feel like they done that for him to be more relatable as well. That's how I looked at it.
Yes, and didn't he make the statement that there's not a lot of money for an honest guy in this? I think.
Yeah, when he was going back and forth with the casino owner, like he's like, "I can make your business my business." He's like, "There's not enough pay for you to do that." So,
Right.
And he doesn't seem to require a lot of money. Like he doesn't seem like real frilly of a man. You know, he's just trying to do what he can do. Um, I was impressed with him. I did think it was kind of funny how whenever they went down to the docks to investigate that murder of the car that went through, how it was just like, oh, what happened. That's what you see. Okay, bye. Like it was a 5 minute investigation, and their mind was made up. But I liked the relationship that he had with that detective um, that he used to work with, and I like the respect that they had for one another.
Cole, you had some stuff to say about Bogart's character in this. You want to elaborate on what you wrote about?
Sure. I felt that Reagan did a really good job of summing up the thoughts I had that I don't know. I just had a hard time translating them onto the discussion board. But I felt that, you know, in this film as well as in Casablanca, he played a very traditionally masculine character, and that was never questioned in this. As well as just the difference in his power in this film. Like in Casablanca, as was stated, he, you know, owned the bar from the very beginning. He was in a very, very powerful situation. And in this, he comes in as kind of just kind of an addition to the story, even though he is the main character. I don't know if that makes any sense or not.
It does. Yeah, he has a very magnetic effect in this movie, right? Especially on women, right? He seems like a James Bond character before James Bond was a thing as far as his charisma and all this. He was more vulnerable in Casablanca, right? I guess that was another thing we could probably say. Much more vulnerable performance with the Rick character.
Yes, and this one, his stance on things in the world are much more set and aren't really disputed throughout the film. That's never brought into the context of it.
Mhm. Philip Malone,
Barlow.
he has an ability. I'll go back to the scene where he shoots into the ground and the guy takes off running. I think he recognized he had met that guy before in the garage when I think he recognized that he wasn't a really bad guy. He was just a guy that was going to, you know, he was a victim of being around these other mean people. And I say that to say this, he had a a wonderful ability as a PI, private investigator, to read people. You've met people that have this ability to read others, and he seemed to be that seemed to be a gift he had. He could read people for what they are, like the young girl in the first scene, even the woman that he falls in love with, Vivian Rutledge. He seems to be able to read people, and from that, he may be a little bit skeptical. He doesn't let you know it, but he's thinking all the time that this character has a flaw.
Yeah, to build off what you said there, Bill, during that first scene, after he talks to the general, he's like going back and forth with the butler at the same time. He's reading the scene with the butler. He even tells him that, right? He's like,
Yeah.
yeah. So he's always inquisitive, as you say.
Yeah, like whenever the butler said something about, "Are you trying to figure out what I do, or are you trying to tell me what to do?" So I'm still trying to figure that out. Like he's always looking to see and paying attention to every little detail.
What did you guys make of this general character? Bill said it's curious that he's only in one scene. He's the one that's supposedly the catalyst for wanting all this blackmail to go away. Absence is an effect in a movie too, right? If a character is only in a scene or one scene, we have to make note of their absence. He's important part of the movie, but he's absent throughout almost all of it. But absence is in a way part of his character too, right? He talks about how he no longer has any like sensory impressions. So, like he gets this Irish guy to drink whiskey so he can vicariously experience it, right?
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know what did you guys make of this character?
I felt his absence actually showed how Lauren was sheltering him from anything that could harm him or bring his name down, like make his name bad in any way. How she acted like that he said, okay, the case is over, here's your money. She didn't really clear things through him. It was like she was more the head of the household. But I felt that he was a caring man. I think that he really cared about the one kid, his like adopted type son. I believe that he really cared about him, maybe because he actually spent time with him while his girls are just out running around. You got one out there sleeping with everything and the other one trying to cover it up. So people are trying to um, blackmail him, and he's just finally tired of it. So he tries to handle it himself. And you can tell that he's a proud man. He's not someone who um, likes being looked at as weak.
I love this character. I kept waiting to see him pop back in. He doesn't pop back in, but his name is mentioned throughout the movie. Even the $500 payoff check, she's trying to make it look like that the general is paying this off, that it's okay with the general. Now this particular, your services are no longer needed. He intrigues me, this gentleman. He's older. He's a general for whatever reason. So we can think about that. Why was he a general? Was he a military man? Probably. And so in that, he's in this greenhouse of a room where it is so hot that you see Bogart sweating profusely and how uncomfortable he is, and yet the general is not uncomfortable at all. So I think it was a great character. Like you said, it was the absent character that has a real significance in the plot.
Yeah, he's an interesting character to look at through the lens of disability too, right? Just because
Yes.
he's the one disabled character in the film, so he's
Mhm.
he's very powerless, to do anything about the whole situation around them. He had a great description of himself. What was it he said? Something about how he's like a bug in the heat or something like that.
He did say that.
Yeah.
He did say that.
With the general's character, I was really missing that interaction with his daughters. Because I feel like if we would have seen that, it would have helped us understand a little bit more how they came to be so different and how their characters got to the point that they were. Because, with the younger daughter, as we talked about, her childishness, that wasn't for no reason. There had to be a reason she was like that. And it could be from him spoiling her and really showing that the only way she could get attention was from being that child, or it could be a number of other things.
Right. He mentions that he has the daughters really late in life as an older man. So maybe like with the second daughter, I think the movie maybe suggests with the second daughter he might not have had the energy so much to maybe raise her as much as he wanted to. I think that suggested that that's part of that the younger daughter, right? He's just older and didn't have as much energy, and maybe wasn't as much of a father figure and all that type of stuff. You guys disagree with me here? You think I'm?
I don't disagree at all about that. Was the younger daughter's name Carmen Sternwood?
Mhm.
Is that right?
That's right.
And the older daughter, her name was Vivian Rutledge. Is that correct?
Right.
Had she been married?
Yeah.
Okay, she was married to Rutledge. Yeah, yeah. I wonder what the age difference was between the two. I think we can look and see there was some age difference. And so I'll say this, my mother had my youngest sister when she was rather in her 40s. And she often said this. We would say, Mom, why do you let Barbara away with more than you let us get away with? And Mom would say, I'm just too tired to control her. And that came to my mind when I saw the general. He didn't have the energy to do what it takes to discipline a teenager. So I could understand that, his position.
Right. Their mother is an absent figure too, right? We don't know when she passed or if they got divorced or what. We don't know anything about that. So there's an absence of a mother figure for the two daughters as well in the movie. So Cole, we can go into some pretty deep psychoanalysis of these two daughters, with father figures and all that. If we wanted to go down that rabbit hole. Do some Sigmund Freud psychoanalysis.
There is one scene that I think was very important, but you could have missed it. If you was watching this movie and you got you a drink of water, you would have missed it. And that was when they are robbing or taking stuff out of the back offices or the back part of, I think it was the first bookstore. And you get to see two men. And of course, later on, they're both interesting into the plot, into the scene. Had you missed that, the person watching would have missed a lot of this movie. So a lot of times it pays us to pay particular attention to movies, because I would have been lost had I not seen those two gentlemen
It's
in that
interesting.
movie.
It's interesting that you brought that up, Bill, because that happened to me on this viewing. I've actually watched this movie twice to prepare for class today. The first time that I completely missed that. So when he went up to shoot the guy in the hotel room, I was
Yes.
like, who is the shooter? I must have missed that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You gotta be on your toes.
This has so many. I know we mentioned it earlier, but this movie has so many. Did y'all hear everything I just said?
Mhm.
Okay, good deal. It looked like my internet went out. But I know we've mentioned it before, but this has so many characters. It feels like you're playing Clue or something. Like you got the casino owner, you got both of the daughters and the general, and you got the private investigator, and you got the private investigator investigating the private investigator, and the guy he works for. It's like everywhere. I was honestly proud of myself for kind of understanding what was going down when the movie ended.
Right.
That's a great point, Corey, because as we're trying to watch these movies for class, we're looking at a lot of things that I've never looked at in a movie. I'll never watch a movie the same again. I'm looking for lighting situations. I'm looking for problems with producing, and I'm looking at characters. And hey, listen, there was one time I almost just stopped it, go and went and got me a piece. I didn't do this. I should have got me a piece of paper and wrote down who the characters were. I believe I would have. And as we talk about these movies, it brings a lot of things together that I really honestly miss sometimes.
I couldn't agree with that more. And I found myself, just day to day, whenever I watch TV, being almost disappointed that there's not more to read into and that there's not more to really evaluate. Me and Dr. Yeager had a conversation in our previous class, and a class that I had with him previously about how some film is just meant to enjoy. It's not meant to read into, to evaluate, to question. And I do find myself just being disappointed sometimes.
Dad and I even do that with TV shows like sitcoms or anything. Or we watch Lone Star Law a lot. And I said we could definitely critique this and then all the different characters and whatever else. So yeah, this class, I get all excited whenever it's time for class. I love this class. I told Dad today, I was like, man, I wish we could take this class again. Like, I love it that much.
Yes. It's like as though when we watch things now, we're looking for every dot and tittle in it because it's so interesting to think about it. You know, and you're watching a movie or a TV show even. You go from one scene to the next. Well, that scene might come back to let's say you're watching a scene, it goes to a commercial, for instance, comes back to the scene. Things will be different. Cups will be maybe half full or half empty. There'll be the cup will be in a different place. A person will have it in the right hand, still their left hand. And I find myself watching these things and you know, I'm just intrigued. You've opened up a can of worms for me, Dr. Yeager. I don't know if this is good or bad.
That's excellent. Seems like you guys have enjoyed all my selections so far. Seems like I've been doing okay with the picking of the movies. It seems.
I love film noir so far. Like, I know like we're only like 7 movies deep, but still, I love it. Both Double Indemnity and this, like I enjoyed completely as movies. Like, not even for film, like not even as like part of the class. Like I liked it for the class. Like I really enjoyed both of these movies a lot.
Yeah, something to say about film noir. It's a genre that takes its audience seriously, right? It's a genre that doesn't simplify things. It knows its audience is fairly sophisticated, right? So it's not an audience that this is a genre that doesn't dumb it down for the viewer, right? That's pretty evident with this movie and how many characters it has and all of that. So it's a smart cinema, very very good stuff. So to prepare you a little bit for Thursday for Chinatown, it's a movie made around 74 or so. Right, Jack Nicholson made this and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest almost back to back. It's crazy to think about. But like we talked about with Apocalypse Now, this movie has that kind of like 70s edge to it, right? That post-Vietnam edginess sort of feel. So think about when you get to Jack Nicholson's character in that, he's not as righteous as Marlowe, right? He's very morally questionable with some of the stuff that he does. So I'll be interested to hear what you guys have to say about that. But this movie is directed by Roman Polanski. We'll talk about him on Thursday. He's an interesting person in and of himself, in a bad way. Okay, but this movie's in color, right? So you'll actually get to see how noir works in color. So this will be interesting for you as well. But
Is Gene Hackman in this movie?
he is not. No.
Okay.
Yeah. Is off topic. Polanski, he's the one who was kind of sort of had to do with the mansion murders, yeah, Manson murders.
He was entangled and all that, yeah.
Yeah.
I have no idea exactly what he has to do with it, but I thought I've heard the name Charles Manson, Roman Polanski before.
Sharon Tate was his wife.
Yes.
Sharon Tate was one of the people murdered. Right, the actress Sharon Tate. He directed. She was in Rosemary's Baby, which he also directed. So yeah, that's then everything goes downhill for him after that. We'll talk about him, how he's kind of a gross human being. Like we'll talk about that a little bit Thursday. But it's a great film. Like it's often called a neo noir, right? Just because it's a movie that understands noir but tries to do new things with it. So I'll be interested to hear what you guys have to say about that. So we'll get 2 Jack movies and 2 Bogart movies in this class. I think that's the 2 repeat performances we'll get. So we'll see you guys Thursday then.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
See y'all Thursday.
Bye.